Our moderator is Lindsey Stanberry from Refinery 29, and she is joined by the amazing Ann Thompson Frenk, who just shared some very heartfelt remarks as she was an awardee, the incredible Lela Goren, and the uncompromising and inspirational Tobi Petrocelli. So welcome to this incredible panel.
Is this working? Can you guys hear me? Yes? Maybe? Hello? This is so incredible. Thank you all for joining us for this panel. These women are an amazing lineup. I was really excited to host this. At Refinery 29, I cover careers and personal finance, and I think a lot about social impact investing. And our readership, honestly, most of them don't even know what a 401k is. So it's exciting to be here and to talk about something a little bit more in depth. Gallup published a poll in January that found that 74% of US investors know nothing about the concept of social impact investing. And at the same time, they found that only 10% know that their money is invested in that way. But from my perspective, from a journalist's point of view, it seems like that's really been changing. We saw that especially over last winter with the conversations around 401ks and gun control, and then more recently this summer around climate change. So not surprisingly, I've really seen women leading the way in this space, and I think that these are really great. The three women on this panel are really great examples of that. Earlier this year, I interviewed this woman, Natalia Aberte Naguaro, who runs this company called Pipeline Angels, and she said to me, my motto is, who do you want to make money for? And that really kind of switched a light bulb on in my head. Who do I want to make money for? And I think that's really what we want to tackle today. So I'm really thrilled to be joined by these panelists, and I want to kick it off actually with Tobi. We're going to just go down the line, and then I'm going to open up some questions. So you've really focused so much of your career on sustainability and social change as it relates to big businesses. I was wondering what new developments you've seen recently and what you're really excited about.
Okay, well, thank you. Thank you, Wendy, for having us here today. It's been an amazing and inspiring day. My name is Tobi Petrocelli. I'm a partner at LLEX Partners. We are a multifamily office, and we make direct investments, and we generate those opportunities by funding entrepreneurs and independent sponsors. And in doing so, we look through an ESG lens. So we attribute most of our analysis to environmental, social, and governance factors in our analysis. And I would say the most, I guess, as far as new developments are concerned, I mean, you see almost $60 trillion of wealth in the next 3 decades shifting to the next generation, and primarily millennials and women. And so their investment criterion and what they want to achieve and who they want to make money for has changed dramatically. So we attribute that to gender lens investing as well, diversity and inclusion. But I believe that's probably the latest development as far as I'm concerned, is this shift in wealth and creating an ESG parameter so that that wealth is created intrinsically with that social impact in mind.
Marianne, your organization really is changing the way nonprofits work. Can you talk a little bit about the inspiration behind that?
Sure. Growing up in a business family, I grew up with an understanding that you need to do the research, you need to understand how things are interconnected, and you need to do all of that before you go in and you put money and time. And the funny thing is, in the nonprofit world, that just isn't the way things are normally done. So we really have brought what I would say are business practices into the nonprofit world. A very good example of this is we have a program in Dallas called Food Source DFW, and we spent 3 years of research to find out what was going on with all these homeless shelters and food pantries. And every single one of them came to us and they told us, you are the first people to ask us what we need. People come in and throw money and say, this is for A, this is for B, and they never ask us what we need. And, I was shocked by that. But then after we found out what it was they needed, and what was happening is you would have pallets or the huge truckload of things that you see coming down the highway. There was a company that donated 3 pallets of yogurt to a homeless shelter that had no refrigeration capability. We found out that if you go into a store and you see a banana and it's not, and they're all perfectly curved, that's not by nature's design. It's because they won't sell a banana that's too straight. So these are, some of them kind of humorous, but tragic. And we started finding out that 30% of the food that could be going to the hungry was actually ending up in the landfill. And after doing that research, we realized it was a distribution problem. So now Food Source DFW fills in that space between those that donate and all the homeless shelters and food pantries. So it took negotiating with all of these different groups to get them to agree and realize they're not competitors, that they'll all benefit more by working together through us, since we're not the competitor, we're just helping them. So, that's just one example. But, if you take business practices and apply it to the nonprofit world, you'll have a much bigger impact.
That's so incredible. I had no idea that they weren't selling straight bananas.
I know, it's silly.
Lela, you are really redefining real estate development. And, it's a traditionally male-dominated industry. You worked for a while at WeWork. And I'm just curious, how are you approaching this industry differently?
Hi. I used to work at the UN 20 years ago. So 20 years ago, I was at the Delegates Lounge. So it's really fun to be here again. How many of you have passed by an old prison, a power plant, a fort, and said, whoa, in your community, outside your community, said, oh my God, that thing is so cool. Someone should do something with it. Raise your hand if you felt that before in life. Yeah, basically everyone, right? So that's what happened to me. I bought an old power plant that sits on the Hudson River, and we're making it a hub for the environmental movement. We purchased, in Chelsea, a women's prison. We're working together with Peter and Jennifer Buffett to make it a hub for the global women's movement, a former prison that's led by formerly incarcerated women. And in San Francisco, right now, we're bidding together with WeWork on a bunch of forts to convert them into a campus for social change. So most people don't think of real estate, men, women, it's just people don't think that way. But if you have any interesting projects like that, or you want to partner with me, let me know.
So one of the things that I wanted to run down the aisle and ask each of you is, why do you think that there is beginning to be more conversations around social impact investing? Tobi, you want to start?
I think it started off as a niche. ESG was a niche. It was something very specific. It started off as the 80s and 90s, avoiding sin stocks, not kind of negative screening. I think we've converged to realize that, based on studies and enough performance data, that the integration of ESG has developed alpha, and that's the goal. So if you have a 401k, or if you care enough about where most of your savings is going, not just, I was mentioning this last night actually to a group of women that, we're millennials and women, we're very conscious of what we buy. We're, from, having a artisanal coffee that's locally sourced, and that's amazing, and the best $5 you've probably spent all day. But, what about your 401k? Where is that money going? Where is the savings that you have? And if you don't have enough to, generate, enough to have a proper wealth advisor, you could still go through the robo-advising methods, and something like an Ellevest is simple enough. And for a few $1,000s, you could start investing in women-led enterprises, women-led companies. And that's kind of one check in the box. But I think you need to just look at your entire portfolio. And if you're making direct investments, and if there are entrepreneurs here in the room, I'd welcome you to meet with me after this, because we're looking for those women-led ideas, industry agnostic, technology all the way to real estate. So please do catch me before the end of the day.
Thank you. In terms of, I think SRIs are growing, people used to just think about profit. Now it's people, planet, profit. And one term that I'd love to throw out there, because I'm always surprised that more people don't know what it is the B Corp. The B Corp, most people are aware of Victor Lebeau, the idea that what is ethical in business is not necessarily what is ethical in terms of morality, because it's defined by how much money your shareholders make. So if you happen to have a CEO that has a conscience, and he knows that by investing investing his money into one thing is going to end up contaminating the water resources of a community, but it's going to make a whole lot more money for the shareholders, guess what? Technically, according to business ethics, he needs to do that. In a B Corp, they give the same rights to the earth and to humanity as they give to the shareholders. So now a CEO is actually legally protected and can go in and say, oh, we're not going to do that. We're still going to make profit, but we're not going to make as much because we don't want to contaminate that. Only, I think, California and New York recognize B Corps, but you can go online, and I think they come out of Brazil, and you can find out what's required, and you can be certified even if you're another type of company, a C Corp or whatever. So I really encourage people to go and do that research, because there's conscious capitalism and there's social responsible investing. And the reason why I encourage more people to do it is how you make your money is as important as what you do with it. You can't just clean your hands, clean the blood off your hands by being good with what you've made.
That was really good. I learned a lot. So it's really interesting. I've had the privilege of working in various institutions. The last one was at WeWork, and we were sort of a startup. I think we're still called a startup. And the shift that I'm seeing, that's just an example of one company. What they're doing now with all their sustainable model, they're the #1 purchaser of furniture, #2 of coffee in the world. It's just supply chain side. So even at WeWork, who are amazing, incredible leadership that care about the world and the planet, are shifting now completely where they're ultimately controlling the supply chain and issuing RFPs on how coffee and furniture and gypsum board and all these things can impact the planet. So whoever in this room has, all of us have some sort of power and control, if it's within our own lives, the companies that we work with, youth that is here that can make an impact. Every single decision, every day, we try to think about in my company, how can we make the right conscious decision to do the right thing that helps other? And it's not just capital IRR, it's lowercase IRR. And what do those returns look like as well at the end of the day?
Are there any really like nuts and bolts practical tips you would give the audience who are interested in becoming more involved with social impact investing but don't really know? It can be really complicated. It can be hard to understand where to even begin. Are there resources that you're really fond of?
Well, like I said, you can see me later. But I think, you have your registered investment advisories, and if you speak to them, you need to ask, where are you placing our capital? I think that's the first question you should be asking, and a lot have not. And some who are granted wealth through generations needs to ask that question to the current advisors that you do have. I think that's something that needs to be posed by us. It's not, no one else is going to do it for us.
I think a lot of banks are kind of slow on the uptake. Most millennials I know are not going to invest when they think that that might actually hurt people. They just won't. They won't go and, we're talking about somebody that's been born with a lot of money. They might be able to drop $5,000 on a dress, but they would not do that if they realize that's being made in a sweatshop. So even if you're so sociopathic, you're only after what's good for your own wallet as a business, you have to care about how you're affecting the world, because the next generation of wealth holders isn't going to be spending money on your business otherwise. So I think with that understanding, if you're one of the people that's trying to make headway, when I began with SRIs, there was no one in any major bank that knew what it was. And still, I oversee my own SRI portfolio. But I will say what you can find is you can ask banks who are invested in things such as Wells Fargo is funding and profiting off of the cages that children are being put in right now. Most banks were invested in what happened up at Standing Rock. Frost refused, and so I moved all my capital to Frost because they would not participate in something that went against morality.
So one practical piece of advice that worked for me really well is join a community. There's so many incredible communities right now, impact communities. So we have Rachel here is the founder of Nexus, which is next gen, incredible community, global community from all over the world. Yes, give her a hand. Incredible group of human beings who are really thinking through all these issues. Another is Forbes Impact. So I've hosted in my house in the last 5 months, probably many of these communities and learned so much from these individuals. And I would say that's one way to really learn. Go to these conferences, meet people, talk to them. That's how I learned.
I'd have to add to that. Rachel Cohen-Garrell and Jonah Whitaker, they both began Nexus, and I learned so much from that to help me navigate through a lot of things.
Just a personal question I have as women navigating. I've had so many women say to me when I speak to my financial person, when I speak to my bank, they tell me not to worry. They're very patronizing with me. How do you find the language to push back on that?
Leave. So I'm an ambassador to a small fund called Blue Sky, and it's a large cap equity multi-strat, and we have almost 40 different ESG roadmaps that we go through, both qualitative and quantitative, to understand how that company is performing on financial material items that are correlated. For instance, you wouldn't look at the carbon emissions of a financial services company. It's not really relative, but employee retention could be very relative. And we use a basic framework for that called SASB, which is kind of the heir apparent to FASB. It's the Sustainability Accounting Standards Board headed by Gene Rogers. It's an excellent framework and guidebook for corporates and public equities to follow to find out where they need to measure and what metrics they need to use in order to justify where they stand on ESG overall. So I think it's important for you to just go into your funds and to look at what your advisors are doing for you. And I think there's even on a smaller scale, things like LVest, like I mentioned, that you could just tap into, and with a couple of grand you can start accounts and just do the research on your own.
And I think, Sally, they've removed all their funds that were funding gun companies.
Yeah, you'll see a lot of you'll always see screening processes. It's kind of the low hanging fruit, but you can dive much deeper than that.
I think that a lot of it is you have to do your own research. Early on when I started, I had some inheritance, and I was so proud because we negotiate the treaty between the Hopi and Navajo. And spending time on the reservations, I saw young children and elderly people that were literally dying and sick and thought they were dying from cancer, and they were actually dying from arsenic poisoning and uranium poisoning. And I came back feeling so good about myself, and then I actually finished my business degree and could actually read these reports, and I discovered I was invested in it. And the feeling of literally feeling like you have blood on your hands because of what's in your bank account is a horrible feeling if you have any conscience at all. That is when I started learning about shareholder advocating, and that's when I started also learning how to change things around. But the big thing that I want to encourage people, because a lot of times you hear politicians say, well, it's in a blind account, and we as society treat it like, oh, okay, that's fine, then they're not complicit. Well, no. Willing ignorance is being complicit. We have to take an actual role in what our money is in, and be able to get on the internet. And it didn't take much time at all for me to be able to find out who's on the board of these companies. And when I found out who was on the board, then I researched what other companies they were on the board of, and then I chose not to invest in those. That was just using Google. Anyone can do that.
Yeah, I see also a lot of young women here today who don't maybe have money yet to place in things, but all of us have to, I think what we're all saying is just question, think through, have a meaningful intention in everything that you do, any investment or any project that you work in. I think that's why you're all here today, because already everyone in this room, we're almost we're preaching to the choir, you're all there already. So just continue to do it, because it's the only way we're going to change things.
Thank you so much for this. This was really educational for me, and I hope for all of you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.